In this Adobe Premiere tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can use simple editing techniques to make it look like you're flying across the sky. We'll do a simple jump up into the air, then fly across the sky, and land at another location. I'm going to be using a simple portable green screen for this effect, but I'll also show you how to do it without a green screen, because sometimes you just don't have one. If you're not using a green screen, make sure that you take a blank background before you do your jump sequence. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing to do is to bring in our background of the first scene. So this is going to be this yard. So I drag that into the timeline. Now I have my first background scene in the timeline. If you're not using a green screen, make sure you capture a plate like this with no actor present. I'm not going to be using the audio on this clip, so I'm going to unlink it and then delete the audio. I'm also not going to be using audio for other clips, so I'll go ahead and turn off the audio tracks right here. I can turn them back on later. The next thing to do is to bring in our green screen clip. I can drag that on top of the background clip. And notice it didn't bring in any audio because I unchecked audio track 1 and 2. The next thing to do on the green screen clip is to make a garbage mat around the portable green screen. We can do that by clicking on the clip in the timeline and then going to the effects controls window under opacity. Click on the pen tool and then make a rough outline around the clip. At the top here, I want to bring this up a bit more. So I want to get all of the green screen possible. So adjust that to your liking. Once we have this adjusted, we need to go to effects. You can go to that by clicking on effects or window effects. In the effects search bar, type in ultra. We're going to drag the ultra key onto our green screen. Then in the effects controls, use this eyedropper to select a key color of the background. That should do a pretty good job, but you'll notice that we still have some of the green screen separating. For an easy key, we can change the output settings from default to aggressive. That'll do a pretty good job of just turning up the tolerances so it grabs more of that green. We can also adjust the spill suppression here to then just adjust how much of that color is taken away. So if you have green fringe around your actor, this can be really good to help that. Next, I'll just scrub through to see if there's any big areas that need to be cleaned up. And for the most part, this looks like a okay key. Up here, we have a little bit of spot that we need to fix. So I can come up here and click mask 1, and then just make sure I bring this mask down, and then that should go away. So just check to see if you have any artifacts on your character, and then you're ready to go. So I took 2 takes. I think I'm going to use the second take. So I'll just scroll down to where the second take happens. So we're looking around. I'll press C to cut the clip in half, then press V. Then I'll press V and delete the left-hand side and drag this over. Now I want to reposition this clip. First thing I'll do is I'll click on it and I'll just move it over to the side here. I think I want to start over on the left-hand side of the screen. So now that we have our green screen character in position on our background, we need to find out where the takeoff ends. So whenever the upward motion stops, so I say about this frame right here, I'll press C and cut it. Then I'm going to move forward. That's the landing. And then we go off camera. And then I'll press C and I'll cut off the end of that clip. Now I have these 2 clips, but I want to put them into their own sequences so I can apply effects to them. So I'm going to right click on the first clip and click nest. I'll call this takeoff. Then I'm going to right click on the next clip and click nest, and I'll call this landing. So now I have 2 clips, takeoff and landing. On the first takeoff clip, I'm going to apply a transform effect. So in the effects search bar, type transform. This will allow us to move the clip around and have motion blur. So I'll put that on the nested sequence. Don't get confused with the motion keyframes at the top and the transform keyframes at the bottom. We want to use the transform keyframes. So I'm going to go ahead and find out where I take off. So somewhere right around here, I want to go before my arms are cut off by the green screen. So I'd say right here. And then I want to hit a position keyframe. So this drops a keyframe right at position. Then I'll move to the last frame of the takeoff and I'll adjust the position up. I want to get the character completely off the screen. And then I'll move the playhead back just to see how that looks. So we jump and we go flying up. But we want this to be an accelerated jump. So if I click on this and this keyframe in the beginning, I want to right click temporal interpolation and we're going to ease out. So that means it will be going at full speed out to the end. So let's take a look at that. That looks great. So now we want to add some motion blur because if we're speeding up into the stratosphere, there's probably some motion blur that's happening. So to do that, scroll down in the effects control panel, unclick use composition shutter angle, and then crank up the shutter angle. And you'll see that you can have all this motion blur. So this should look a lot better now. All right, so now we've taken off. We still look a little bit fake in this background. So let's add a shadow. We can do that easily since we've already keyed out the character. I'm going to hold Alt or Option to duplicate the clip. Then on the lower clip in the effects panel, I'm going to type shadow and just bring a drop shadow effect on this clip. Make sure you have the lower clip selected and then click the box that says shadow only. This means we won't see the actual character in that lower clip. If I turn off the top clip, you'll notice I just have a shadow for the character. So what we want to do for this shadow is change the scale. By default, everything scales uniformly, but we want to scale the height way down. So we kind of get a little bit of perspective, and then we'll just scale the width out just a little bit. Then we'll bring the eyeball back on the top clip, and we'll change the position of our shadow. So we'll put our shadow at the feet, and then we'll change the softness of the shadow to be nice and soft. So it's just a nice subtle effect. And if we press play, now we get a nice shadow, but it looks a little strange when we are zooming up in the air. So pick a spot where you think the shadow would be visible last, go one frame back, and then click the shadow layer. Then in the effects control panel, click on the opacity stopwatch to drop a keyframe at 100%. Then move forward to the end of the clip and then drop the opacity to 0. So that way that shadow just fades out as you disappear. Great. So now we have our takeoff. I'm going to hide these background layers and then find a frame that I think looks good for flying. I think this frame right here looks perfect for flying. So I'm going to click this little camera and this will allow me to export an image. So I'm going to call this flying still. And make sure you use a PNG so we get this transparent background. And then I'm going to import it into the project. Now that I have it in the project, I can bring it into my composition. So here now it looks exactly the same, except if I turn these layers on, you'll notice that this is just a still image. So everything is happening, but now I have this still image. I'm going to move this image over, and then let's see, how long do I want the yard to still be there? So I fly away just a little bit. So then I'll trim off the yard and delete it. I have some other movies of buildings that I'm going to bring in. So I have these buildings. And so I'll have my character flying across these buildings. And we can do that by moving the character on top of them. And so this doesn't look so good. So how can we make this character move across the buildings? First, let's move the landing down. And we don't want it to be very long. So let's see. Probably about that long. And then we'll trim this clip. And then we'll bring in our other buildings. So we have probably about that long. Now we have 2 places for our character to fly. But we need to make our character the right size. To do that, we can click on the character and then just scale the character down to whatever flying size that we want. And then we can also rotate the character to the side. So this looks good here. And then so we can use the transform controls. I'm going to go ahead and nest this. This will allow us to have motion blur. So I will right click on the clip and nest, and I'll call this flying figure. So now we have our flying figure, and I'm going to trim the clip right here. And then I can just duplicate it by holding Option or Alt. And then I have two versions of the clip. So they are exactly the same, but I can treat them independently. So first, let's go ahead and have this character fly across the screen. So I'm going to start here, and then in the effects panel, I'll click Transform, drag Transform effect onto the figure. Once we have the Transform effect applied, make sure you click a keyframe on Position. Then position the character where you want them to start flying. We can have them go off screen at the beginning, and then we'll move all the way to the end. Make sure the clip is selected, and then move to the next location. We'll have them fly across the screen. Maybe we'll have them go down a little bit and then all the way off. So let's see how that looks. Excellent. You can also use a mask to cut out these buildings if you want the character to come out from behind the building. But I think just flying in front will be a nice comedic effect. Now I'm going to click on Flying Figure, and in the Effects Control panel, I'm going to uncheck Use Composition Shutter Angle, and then just crank up the shutter angle so we get all that nice motion blur. So let's see what that looks like. All right, very funny. So then we'll do this one more time on this clip here. So the same process, click on the clip, drag on the transform. Then on transform on the first frame, click a position keyframe, move the character into position. Probably want them to come down a little bit, and we'll go up this time. So they're off frame, move to the end of the clip. I think I'm going to move it to right here. And then go ahead and animate all the way across. Raise it up if you wish. Off screen. And then once again, we'll uncheck Use Composition Shutter Angle and crank up the shutter angle. And then I'm going to trim both of these clips to length. Okay, let's take a look. So we take off, fly across the buildings, zoom. Okay, now we just need to land somewhere in the city. So we have our landing clip. I'll bring this over. And our landing clip is simple, just landing and then moving off camera. So what I want to do is go inside this nested sequence, because you see how we kind of come off of the camera there. We can move that right to the edge of the screen. So I'll go inside this sequence. And then on this clip inside the sequence, I'm just going to click on it. And then in the effects control panel, I'm going to move it over so that's actually going off the screen. So now that'll be reflected when we come back to this clip. As you see, everything works out fine. So nested clips are very convenient for taking care of things. And you also notice that I probably need to fix my mask right there. So we can go back into the clip, click on mask, and then we can just bring this mask over a bit and make sure we get some of that green screen that wasn't keyed out. So that probably takes care of that. We'll go back to our main composition. Yeah, that looks a lot better. We still have a little bit here, but we're not going to notice that when it's on the background. So let's get our background for the landing. We have this parking garage, so we'll bring that in. Okay, so now we're going to land in the parking garage. So we got to animate the landing, but this time it's going to be the opposite. So we're going to use the same effect. We'll go to Effects, Transform, right on the landing there. And then on the first frame, we'll set a keyframe for position. And then I'm actually going to move to where the landing is first, because I want to set that. So this is when our feet hit the ground. So I want to now set this position. I want to move us over just a little bit maybe, and especially down a little bit. I think that will be good. Then I'm going to go back to the beginning of the clip, and we need to animate coming in. So now let's take a look at that. I'll scroll back. All right. We land and walk off camera. Perfect. Then I'll just trim off the end of this parking garage right there. But we need to add a shadow. So we'll use the same technique that we used on the takeoff. Hold Alt or Option to duplicate the clip. Then on the lower clip, type in shadow in Effects preset. Shadow. Drag a drop shadow onto the lower clip. Then in the effects controls, click shadow only. And then we want to scale the shadow only. And we don't want uniform scale. We want to be able to scale the height way down. And then we're going to scale the width up pretty much. And then I will reposition it by moving it over and down. Next thing to do is just make the softness of the shadow a lot more so it blends in. And then probably we're going to keyframe it invisible in the beginning, because right here you can see it doesn't look so bad. You know, it's not totally natural, so we'll just have it fade in. Make sure you have the lower clip selected, and then on its opacity, we'll drop a keyframe at the very beginning and have that opacity be 0. Then we'll move forward a few frames by typing the right arrow key. And then somewhere around here, we probably will see the shadow, so I'll type 100. There we go. So now we can see the shadow landing. And for both of these transitions, we want to have the second position keyframe be an ease in because we're slowing down. We want this to be an ease in because we're slowing down. So right click on the second position keyframe in the transform effect, temporal interpolation, and ease in. You'll have to do this on both clips if you didn't do it already. So then I'll right click on this one as well, temporal interpolation, and then ease in. Okay, so now I think we have all the elements. We just need to add some sound effects. So in the project panel, I have these great sound effects from Adobe, which you can download yourself. For the beginning, I'm going to use the ambiance in the backyard. Press C to go ahead and trim that right at the beginning. And then for the city scenes, I'm going to use this bus stop near a road effect. Then I'm going to trim it to length. And then I need a takeoff effect. And I love this fire torch movement effect. I've used it before. So then we're going to find out where are we taking off. Right there. I'm going to zoom in and make sure this fire torch is right on takeoff. All right, I think that'll be perfect. And then we need to have a landing sound. So let's go to landing. So here we hit the ground and I have this impact body fall on concrete. So I'll put that right there. Let's zoom in to make sure that is actually there. So I'll just move over a couple frames. Then we need to have a swishing sound for flying. And here I have this Foley coat rustle leather. So I'll bring that in, even though it's not actual flying. And then I'm just going to trim it off right there. And for this sound effect there, I can go ahead into the effects control panel and type in fade. And then in audio effects, I can drop exponential fade on the end of the bus stop, trim that down a little bit. And then I can also drop it on the end of this flying sound and then trim that nice and short. So now we have a good clip. But when we land, we're so powerful with all our flying that I want to make some camera shake when we land. To do that, I can go to the project window and then click this new button and then make a new adjustment layer. It'll automatically make it the size of the frame. I need to find where I land in the timeline. So I think right here, and I'm going to drag the adjustment layer over. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. You can go 5 or 6, whatever you choose. I'm going to trim that adjustment layer. And so it's easy to select. I'm actually going to padlock these other video layers so I don't accidentally select them. You can also padlock your audio layers. And then that way, if this is selected, it will just stay selected. And I find that is a good way to work if I'm working on little clips like this. So then in the effects panel, type in transform, our good old transform effect, drop it on the clip. Then in the beginning of the clip, click a keyframe for position and a keyframe for scale because we need to scale it up. So we're going to go ahead and type in 101 for scale. And this adjustment layer will affect all the clips below it. So then I'm going to leave all the positions by default. Then I'll move forward 1 frame and I'll swing the camera over a little bit and the camera, let's say, down. Then move forward 1 frame. Then I'll go crank it all the way past the other way. So go above the 1920. And then I'll go up. And then when we get back here, we'll just have it go back to normal 1920 by 1080. And then, of course, we want to use motion blur. So we'll just crank this up a little bit to have some motion blur on that effect. So there you can see everything's just a little bit blurry. You can, if you go way too far, that's probably too much. So, somewhere in the middle that we're making a comedic effect. So I'm going to exaggerate a little bit. Let's see how that looks. Nice. We have the camera shake when we land. And the nice thing about doing this with an adjustment layer is we can do camera shake when our powerful takeoff happens. So all we have to do is copy this frame. We can hold Option or Alt to duplicate it. And then we just find out where our takeoff is. So right about there, that's where all that camera shake's going to happen. And so now we can play, and we have that powerful energy field of takeoff. It's so powerful that we rustle the camera. So this is everything you need to be able to do a takeoff and landing effect. And just as promised, I'm going to show you how you can do this entire effect if you only had a camera. So let's drag over a duplicate of our yard background. So this is just a blank plate of the yard. Make sure that you record a blank plate. And then you need a clip of you jumping. So here we have our no green screen video clip right here. And then we have ourselves jumping. So what you want to do is find the place that you are about to jump. And as soon as you jump, so right here, press C to trim it. And then of course you would separate the other sections and make sure you select the second clip and you're on the first frame of it, then right click and add a frame hold. Now this is just as if it was a single clip. On this clip, we're going to go ahead and click the pen tool of opacity. We can just make a quick mask around the figure. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to have motion blur. So there we go. Now we have our figure. And of course, you can trim in closer, especially for the flying across the city. You don't want a bunch of bushes behind you, but it's just a single image to cut out. Then we'll go ahead and get our transform effect. So drag transform onto this clip, and then go to the beginning of the clip. We'll set a keyframe on position. Then we'll move forward maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, maybe 5 we'll take. Then we'll go ahead and keyframe this all the way up out into the stratosphere. Unclick composition shutter angle, crank this up because we want to blur out all those bushes. And then we will just have ourselves taking off. And that works pretty well. And then you can do that same effect. We can bring over our camera shutter shake right there. That's when we'll have our camera shake. That'll make it even more as if we don't know what's going on. So everything will just be hidden. Perfect. So that is a way that you can do this flying effect, even if you don't have a green screen. So hopefully you are flying all around your city in no time.